Don't ask me how they keep doing it, but the St. Louis Cardinals have Paul Skenes' number, and they beat him again on Tuesday night behind a marvelous outing by Matthew Liberatore. We'll talk about it coming up on b-schaeff Daily. What's going on, everyone, and welcome in to this edition of b-schaeff Daily. Brenden Schaeffer with you. It is now the early morning hours of Wednesday, May 7th, 2025. And we are once again talking about the St. Louis Cardinals beating Paul Skenes, one of the best young pitchers, forget young, one of the best pitchers in baseball, period, bar none. And the Cardinals somehow got to him again on Tuesday to win this game and make a rightful winner out of Matthew Liberatore, who was fantastic on Tuesday night, firing 7 innings of one-run baseball, striking out 8, which matches a career high for Liberatore. He walked 3 in this game, but a couple of them, he was getting squeezed tonight, and still found a way, didn't let that faze him, didn't flinch, continued on his path when some calls didn't go his way, and Matthew Liberatore gets his 3rd win of the season, improves the ERA to 3.07, and further solidifies that the Cardinals absolutely nailed it, giving him this opportunity in the rotation out of spring training. He has been the biggest revelation on this roster over the course of the first month plus of the season, and he doesn't look like he's letting go of that starting rotation spot anytime soon. It took him a few years to grab hold of it, but he's got a vice grip on it now. And he outdueled Paul Skenes on Tuesday, plain and simple. And it's not like the Cardinals, we talk about their dominance of Paul Skenes, and it's true. Paul Skenes is now 0-4 against the Cardinals. He's never beat them. But the ERA Paul Skenes had against the Cardinals coming into tonight was 2.70. Lifetime, which only dates, of course, back to last year, 194 opposing batting average and a 486 opposing OPS against Skenes coming into Tuesday. Cardinals got 4 hits in the game. All these Paul Skenes games, other than the one that happened in early April this year, where the Cardinals actually did get to Paul Skenes and put up 5 runs, all the other ones have basically just been like this. Seems like a 2-1 game. The Cardinals scrap away until they find one meaningful hit, and it happened in the 6th inning on Tuesday night against the Pittsburgh Pirates phenom. As you had a base hit by Arenado, Wilson Contreras works a walk, and there's a meeting on the mound, bottom of the 6th inning. Pitching coach comes out. Quick conversation and back to it for Paul Skenes. But Alec Burleson was the man standing in his way when he returned to the rubber. And first pitch swinging, Burley takes a 99-mile-per-hour fastball and serves it the other way into the left field corner. 2-run double. Cardinals take the lead. Cardinals win the game by that same score. As it doesn't take much, but you take the opportunities when they're there for you. And Burley, who now has 6 lifetime hits in the big leagues against Paul Skenes, more than any other big leaguer. He's 6'4", I believe it's 15 now, as he was 5 for 12 coming into Tuesday's affair. And he goes 1 for 3. He worked a long at bat in his first time facing Skenes on Tuesday. Skenes struck him out. I believe was first pitch swinging on the next at bat, and then we saw the same thing in the 3rd AB. Burley comes up clutch. His 3rd day in a row having a big power swing for the Cardinals. This was a double. He had a homer on Sunday and a homer on Monday. As he's starting to come around in the batter's box, and my goodness, do we start to see this Cardinal lineup coming together or what? I know that this wasn't the game to necessarily make that type of claim. But I think you know at this point what Lars Dupar's going to be. You have a good idea what Mason Wynn's going to be, what Brendan Donovan's going to be for your team. He had one of the Cardinals' 4 hits tonight. We talked about Arenado. You kind of know what he's going to be. He did strike out 3 times, but had a hit that helped set up that big moment for Alec Burleson. Wilson Contreras showed well tonight at the plate. He didn't have a hit, but drew a couple of key walks for the Cardinals. It's kind of crazy when you have a game the Cardinals win and you're looking at the box score and half the guys didn't even have a 4th plate appearance because there weren't that many hits, there weren't that many base runners in the game. That's the way that it ended up going for the Cardinals tonight, but they got enough. The big swing by Burleson. My point, though, with the lineup, and look, we're going to wait and see with Jordan Walker. He's going to try to get going, and I do think there's still time for him to do so. Tonight was not necessarily that night, but he did reach once via walk. Victor Scott, I'm very intrigued to think that you might see him continue on the path he's been on. He was 1 for 3 tonight. He's hitting .286. He's got a .763 OPS. You're talking about a lot of names in this lineup that are starting to go. Contreras, of course, up to a .730 OPS, and I think he's going to continue to rise from there rapidly. And Ivan Herrera is supposed to be added back to this Cardinals lineup before too long as he is continuing his rehab stint, kind of a prolonged rehab down with the Memphis Redbirds, and they're playing over in Charlotte this week. We'll talk a little bit about the beginning of that series and how it looked for Ivan Herrera, who continues to get work behind the plate. I believe it was 7 innings today, not to spoil any down on the farm fare, but he's coming. He's going to be on the way before too long, and when that happens, he's another big bat to add to a Cardinal lineup that's finding a way right now. 4 wins in a row, and don't look now, but the Cardinals on Wednesday afternoon at Busch will have Sonny Gray on the bump with a chance to not only sweep the Pirates, but get to a 500 record on the season before what I think is a pretty pivotal road trip that'll go through 3 cities, Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, and Kansas City, to take on a Royals team that maybe another example of don't look now. They've been red hot recently, despite really not getting a lot of offense for Kansas City, but they've won 8 of their last 10 with some really good starting pitching that the Cardinals will see a couple of weekends from now as that long 3-city road trip wraps up in Kansas City. The Cardinals have an opportunity, though, to reach 500 a lot more quickly than I think anybody would have anticipated after you lose Game 1 to the Mets. You had the rain out on Saturday, and Sunday comes and goes with a doubleheader win, and since then the Cardinals have wrapped out a couple of wins over the Pirates. I mean, these are close games, competitive games, but really complete team efforts. I look at it as a team effort. I really do. When you're facing Paul Skenes, you don't anticipate the flow of the game being typical to what you would expect against any average starter. Paul Skenes is not an average starter. Pirates might be 12-25. Paul Skenes is not the reason. He is really, really good, and I think this is kind of the way you have to be able to beat him if you're going to do it. And maybe the Cardinals have cracked that formula, where he walked 4 tonight, didn't give up much contact, didn't give up much hard contact, still had 6 strikeouts in 6 innings, and his ERA for the season is still 2.77. But the Cardinals worked him enough. They got him up over 100 pitches, and that's what you end up seeing Alec Burleson serving pitch number 101 from Skenes into left field, into the corner, 99 on the gun. So, of course, he's still pumping heat. But Burleson finds a way to wait for the pitch that he's looking for, and when Paul Skenes gives it to him right out of the gates, you're ready for it. And Alec Burleson certainly was there in the bottom of the 6th inning, coming up with the key swing of the game for the Cardinals, and sometimes it's all you're going to get, and it's all you're going to need when you get outings like the Cardinals got from Matthew Liberatore tonight. And we want to talk about the bullpen as well, because this was a day where, tracing back to Monday's game, when you had that blown call at home plate on Victor Scott II scoring a run that the umpiring crew didn't give to him, and then the replay center in New York didn't give to him, and I still don't know how that happened. Oli Marmol mentioning on the Gas House Gang show on Tuesday afternoon that airs on KMOX that he was hoping for an explanation from the league office as to, what they were seeing on that replay review and why their result didn't match up with what the Cardinals on their internal video angles and their evaluation of the play told you, which was that he was safe. And we all saw the same thing out in the public, that he was safe, and somehow they got that wrong. That ends up being relevant because what it set up is maybe a different way to have to navigate your bullpen on Tuesday. When that happens on Monday and you end up going Leahy, Maton, Helsley for the 9th, you might have been able to save one, maybe more than one of those guys if that inning goes differently, right? If the Victor Scott play is called accurately, as I saw it, and the Cardinals score a run, that's their 7th run of that game. And so you're talking about a 4-run lead potentially where you don't maybe go to Maton. You maybe don't have to go to Helsley. Whether we still see Leahy in that same spot, who knows? Maybe if the Cardinals continue the rally, Graceffo ends up throwing multiple innings. If, let's say, the Cardinals, that inning continues last night, I'm talking about Monday night now, and it's a 5-run game or a 6-run game because the Cardinals keep sending the next man to the plate and they keep producing and they keep coming up with a way to extend that rally instead of having it end on the play at the plate with O'Neal Cruz throwing out Victor Scott, which he didn't do, even though they ruled that he did. if it goes that way, you might have a completely different setup for Tuesday's game against Paul Skenes. But Ollie Marmol was aggressive in managing the bullpen Monday, knew that was a win that they needed, and he got the result 6-3. And then, yeah, that sets it up a little bit differently for Tuesday. But when Matthew Liberatore gives you 7, suddenly you're operating at a luxury once again. And it was interesting to see the way that Ollie turned when it comes to not having some of those A-flight relievers available. I think he went to a couple of guys who very quickly could assimilate into roles that could tell us, hey, maybe this Cardinal bullpen ends up being better than we thought it was going to be. Because Steven Matz in the 8th got his job done. And how about Gordon Graceffo? Maybe new Ryan Fernandez in a lot of ways. Coming in and taking that 9th inning when Helsley was not available after a pretty adventurous 9th on Monday. Graceffo, easy, breezy, beautiful. 6 pitches, 5 strikes. All there is to it. Got out of there 1-2-3 and gives the Cardinals the win. The only thing that was really stressful about Gordon Graceffo's 9th inning was whether or not the outfielders were going to convince the fan out in center field to give them the baseball back after, I believe it was Vic that threw it out there and, not realizing in the moment that it was Gordon Graceffo's first career save. And Vic in the clubhouse was kind of a couple of locker stalls away as we were talking with Gordon Graceffo after the win, and chimed in from the corner, yeah, no, we got the ball back. Don't worry. It's all taken care of. Everything's good on that front. And so Gordon Graceffo got that baseball, and he got the laundry cart celebration for the second time in a week, because his first major league win came just about a week ago in Cincinnati when he came on in relief and did a great job for the Cardinals down the stretch of that game. Remember, he was the second man, or I guess the 27th man, I should say, in a doubleheader, and went the distance the rest of the way that night when the Cardinals needed him to, because of a similar conversation with how the bullpen had been used up. When you're playing 2 games in one day, certainly you're going to need somebody to give you some length, and he did just that. That 9-1 win for the Cardinals. The bats had really gotten cooking, and Steven Matz didn't quite get you through 5 in that game against Cincinnati. So they let Graceffo go the rest of the way, which earned him the win. So he got the laundry cart celebration then. He gets it again on Tuesday night as he earns a save for the first time in the big leagues. And this is not really a role that he's ever been familiar with, but it was a back-to-back for Gordon Graceffo as well, because he pitched in the game on Monday, right? Remember, we talked about his 6th inning to earn that win, his 2nd of the season. No laundry card for your 2nd win. But that was a key spot because the Cardinals score their runs in the following inning, which allows Ollie to set up his bullpen for 7, 8, 9. Yes, it should have extended probably beyond that 3-run lead, and maybe you do get a big enough crooked number that you change the order of operations for the bullpen thereafter. But with the way it played out, Graceffo was a guy that Ollie Marmol was kind of looking toward as the day began on Tuesday, thinking, okay, how's he going to come in? How's he going to look? And if he feels like he's ready to do it, he's putting in the prep and have a back-to-back after not a particularly taxing inning of relief on Monday, then Graceffo was going to be one of the guys you lean on to potentially close out that game. And lo and behold, the situation comes up, and it's exactly the way that it plays out. And Graceffo nailed it. So could the Cardinals, I mentioned new Ryan Fernandez, could the Cardinals have another guy in that ilk where you think about the way that Fernandez was used last year as he sort of gained more trust and elevated into a role where Oliver Marmol was more than willing to go to him in the 7th, in the 8th, and sometimes as the backup closer if Ryan Helsley was unavailable. And, Kittredge, JoJo had been heavily taxed as well. Usually anytime those guys pitched, Helsley was soon to follow. They were kind of the 7th, 8th, 9th crew last year. So there were days where, who's your next man up? And a lot of times it was Ryan Fernandez. Now, right now, he's still down in AAA, working through some things, and I think we're going to see Fernandez back up here sooner rather than later if he's able to kind of assimilate and get things going again, which is, all along the plan that I thought would make the most sense for the Cardinals and Ryan Fernandez is not to banish him to Memphis and leave him there, but have him work on some things, kind of like we saw with Chris Roycroft, where right now Roycroft is back up with the Cardinals, and he's sort of in that reserve role where break glass in case of emergency, and the game situations have maybe just not dictated for Roycroft to pitch the last couple of days, and sometimes the season flows in that direction, and it feels like you're the right guy for some spots multiple days in a row, and sometimes you're waiting a little bit for that next chance to prove yourself. But whether it's Roycroft or whether it's Fernandez down the line, I think those are guys that are going to be able to help out. But Graceffo quickly elevating into a role where I think you could see that out of him, where he could become anything from like new Fernandez to kind of sort of combining with what Kyle Leahy had been, because we see him pitch in the 6th inning on Monday, bridging the gap to the late inning guys. And then sometimes he is the late inning guy when he's available and others aren't for that spot. That's exactly how guys like Fernandez were used last year, and how Leahy, I think, was designed to be utilized at the beginning of this year, but he just kept answering the bell with bigger and bigger situations until, he's not somebody that's necessarily going to be the bridge guy anymore. He's part of that leverage crew, that late inning crew, and really all he can put him, Kyle Everyday, into games whenever and however he needs to, and Leahy's just going to answer the bell. That's what he's proven to be able to do so far. I mentioned Matthew Liberatore as the biggest revelation of this roster. I think Kyle Everyday is a close second, because he's been unbelievable in his role as well. So it's been interesting to see how quickly things can turn back in the favor of the St. Louis Cardinals when we think about the bullpen, because I've identified it a number of times. I came into this season knowing that this was going to be a lower payroll, that expectations were going to be lower, and the way that we talked about this team was going to be a little bit different. But I also said, you know what, there's no reason the Cardinals, who won 83 games last year, can't do it again and maybe be in the mix for a playoff spot too. And so I'm trying to think back. I think my prediction was right around 83, 84 wins is what I said, what I put myself out on the line with when we wrapped up preseason conversations and got into the meat and potatoes of the real campaign. 83, 84 is about where I thought the Cardinals would be. And so far this year, we haven't seen them on that pace, but now we're starting to see them put it together. And if they can keep on this run long enough to finish off the Pirates and have me send the tweet on Wednesday, and then maybe go on a little bit of a happy flight and have a good road trip, we could be looking at this Cardinals team in a very different light by the time you get to mid or late May. I think that's still all on the table before them, even though those expectations are a little bit lowered, right? But there's also a realm right now where if the problem of the early portion of the season, when the Cardinals really were in a rut, which was the bullpen, just not having the consistency in terms of the depth, and like guys like Roycroft and Fernandez really struggled, and then you haven't really gotten the most consistent version of even guys like Ryan Helsley, who's been one of your better relievers, and he's obviously your closer. And then there's JoJo, there's John King, guys that have just not quite met the level of performance that they put out there last year. Last year's team won 83 games largely because of the bullpen, because of especially the late inning guys and the leverage guys. When you had a game there on the platter, they usually cleaned it up because 7, 8, 9, they were so solid with a lead. You often were trying to find who that fourth guy, that fifth guy was going to be, and Fernandez ended up kind of settling into that role for much of the latter portion of the season. But yeah, there were definitely some spots in the bullpen last year that you were looking for a little bit more. But even with that, they won 83 games. The bullpen was a huge reason because the rotation was, bottom half in ERA. The lineup was 22nd in the league in runs scored. They were above 500 because when they had a game to be won, they pretty well won it, and they were great in one-run games as well. This year, for a while, it was looking like the bullpen suddenly was not only not going to be a strength, it was going to be a notable weakness and maybe an anchor weighing down the potential of a team that was finding better offensive production, that was getting start after start consistent from this group, whether it's been a 5-man or a 6-man rotation. It's been a really good mark on this Cardinals team, what the rotation has done. And so you're thinking, well, the record hasn't changed, but they're better offensively, maybe not markedly so, because there's still a consistency factor that I think you're waiting to see unlocked from the Cardinals, but they may be getting there. We'll see. But certainly in the rotation, I think, you can think of 2 starts from Fetty and 1 from Michaelis that have been not good, and otherwise there's really not a lot to complain about. Palante has to come back around a little bit from his recent outings, but the Cardinals have been able to win some of those anyway. The rotation has been really, really good. It's been as good as you could have possibly asked for, I think, if you're the Cardinals. But if that 83-84 win prediction is going to come to fruition, the bullpen has to be, I think, a strength again. And then you find, all right, if the offense is a little better than last year, instead of 22nd runs, let's say they finished in the middle of the pack, they're 15th. Rotation, instead of 20th in starters ERA or whatever they were, maybe they're closer to 15th in that category. And then you think, well, if the bullpen just matches what it did, which is not going to be easy, but if it could do that, suddenly you've got the recipe to win some of those close games. Maybe they win more than 83, and you really are talking about a potential playoff push for this team against all odds, against all expectations. For a while there in the middle of April, it seemed like that was just a fool's errand. Now we're here on May the 7th, and I'm not saying it's locked and loaded that the Cardinals are going to be back to this possibility for the season, but I'm not counting them out from it because I wasn't before the season. And then when the bullpen really seemed like regression was going to hit them like a truck, I was like, all right, that's the way this goes south because the bullpen keeps blowing games. They can't find that mix. The offense gets a little bit frustrated. They have more games than they should where they don't really put up the competitive fight to stay in something. The rotation eventually falters because it's hard to keep up the pace they've been on. And then the next thing you know, you get to July and you're looking up and going, well, we're in fourth place, 10 games under 500, and here comes the sell, which is going to lead to even more losses, and bang, you're right back to 71 and 91 or in that territory like you were in 2023. That was a realm, and technically still is a realm where the Cardinals could end up living. But I also think there's just too much about this team to like to believe that that's going to happen. I read off some of the names in the lineup. A lot of guys that are sitting in that soft zone of 740, 750, 760 on the OPS. Guys like Nootbaar, Mason Wynn, Arenado is 737, but he'll be a little better. Contreras is up to 730, and that's after he was in like the fours for the first couple of weeks or whatever it was. Donovan's at 860, so I mean that's five guys in the lineup that are average or better. And in the case of a guy like Contreras, who's got one of the lower rates there of the group, he's way on the rise. He's been their hottest hitter over the past couple of weeks. Burleson, he's up to 656 on the OPS with 3 great days. Can he have another great week? And then suddenly he's right in that category with the rest of them. And Victor Scott is at 763. Like, you've got 2/3 of a lineup, basically, of guys that I think are really in a spot that you can rally behind. Pozo's been a nice catcher in terms of the backup. He's still hitting 316 after an over 3, 807 OPS. Herrera, though, is coming. And if he can lock down that catcher spot 60% of the time behind the plate and DH, 30% of the other 40, so he's playing 90% of the time, you're getting his bat in there. That's 7. And then you go, all right, Walker, all right, Gorman, between the two, find a way for those guys to elevate, and they're going to continue to play quite a bit. You can see up and down a 1 through 9 that could be potent for this Cardinals team. And we've talked about the rotation. It's just been splendid. What Matthew Liberatore has done has been sensational. And I think it's going to get to a point where I'm going to go, hey, how many innings did this guy throw last year? And the answer is 86. And you go, how many innings could he possibly throw this year? Because he's almost been too good, been too efficient, where you're starting to think about the innings climbing on him, and it's early May. I think he's always had that sort of rubber arm, the way the Cardinals viewed him. He could bounce back quickly, and he did have 125 innings in 2023 because he spent a good portion of that year in Memphis, of course, and he was in the rotation. And so with that, maybe there's enough recent history to think he could get to an innings mark that it's not that noticeable toward the end of the season. Like if he continues on this pace, throwing 6-7 innings every time he pitches, unless there's a rain delay that causes him to stop short, later on in the year, the Cardinals might have to curb his enthusiasm a little bit and, make sure he stays at a number that keeps him strong and fresh and ready to go for hopefully a 2026 where the Cardinals are intent upon getting back into the mix with, supplementing the roster and trying to make sure they're a good club or can be one. So we'll see what that ends up looking like for Libby, but he's been fantastic. Like I said, 3 walks today, very uncharacteristic of his season. I think he came into the day with maybe only 3 or 4 walks on the whole year and over 30 strikeouts. He has been sensational. 3 hits allowed. Like there were two of those 3 walks, I think at least. You had Libby getting squeezed on ball 4 or a big pitch in those at bats where it probably should have been a different outcome. He had another play that went against him and the Cardinals when they challenged at second base the O'Neill Cruz stolen base. Looked to me like Brendan Donovan slapped a tag, but replay, as it did on Monday, said, call stance. We don't see anything. I thought that the tag had happened on like the shoulder of Cruz before the fingertip got onto the bag, but it's one of those where the universal truth is different than the camera angles that are available, and so even if I'm pretty sure on universal truth that I can know, all right, that's how a finger would act if it wasn't touching the base, and that's when it is. You can tell, kind of where the contact is made, but you can't see it with like this burden of proof of a train that you can drive through the gap between the finger and the base. You can't see that because there's no angle of that, and so they just say, call stance. I lean back to why do you have replay if these calls look pretty definitive and you end up still getting them wrong time after time for your MLB. This one was the more quintessential. The situation, the play, and how MLB tends to rule with these. They're going to leave the call on the field. And so that wasn't surprising to me, even though I do think universal truth, they got it wrong. Monday was indefensible. That was the worst instance of replay review I've ever seen. But it still counts as something on Tuesday that went against Matthew Liberatore that he was unfazed by. He doesn't flinch as a result of that. Now, Brian Hayes does score the run or plate the run with his RBI double later on in that sequence. And it was one of those where you batted ball, you go, yep, that's a high fly ball that you would normally think someone's going to catch it, but it was just right into, I think I said on Twitter, the gappiest part of the gap where it was between the center fielder and the right fielder. Nobody was going to get to it. And it hung up for long enough that you would hope, but it's just he perfectly placed it like a cue shot. No, it's not like he had soft contact. It was like to the track, I think. But it was just one of those deals where, okay, all right, now he's got you. What are you going to do to respond? Liberatore bounces back, gets out of that inning. Cardinals get him a couple of runs thanks to Burleson in the bottom of the sixth. And next thing you know, he's back out there for the seventh as Libby, shutting down the Pirates one more time. 99 pitches, 70 strikes, 8 strikeouts. The 3 walks I hardly hold against him. Just 3 hits allowed. Liberatore was sensational once again, and he's sitting there with a 3.07 ERA at this point in the season. Probably would be sub 3 if it hadn't rained during his previous start because he gave up that home run early, but early is all he was able to do because of the rain. 3 innings and he gave up 2 runs. That start ends up as a 6-inning, 2-run outing, just like all of his other ones have been, at least. He's been that or better pretty much every time. And he's got a sub-3 ERA right now. But it's 3.07, and he's locked in. He is really in a great spot. And like I said, one of those big revelations of the season. We'll see if it continues. And it's easy a little bit right now to dream on that 2026 rotation when you go, all right, what's the future going to look like? Because people are excited about Michael McGreevy, and they should be. He's going to be here soon. Oliver Marmol raving about him on that Gas House Gang show this afternoon. I think we're going to see him before too long. You've still got the numbers game, though, that the Cardinals are contending with. Matt's moving to the bullpen. I have said I would have preferred to see Matt's get a longer look in the rotation, but they're not upsetting the apple cart right now, and they're trying to find their way through with Fetty, and he's in that same boat as Matt's with an expiring contract. In a world where the Cardinals aren't contending, you can get something for both those guys at the deadline. Matt's, though, his willingness to just take on whatever role and continue to thrive in whatever role has been unbelievable. And there is a realm to which it's like he's going to benefit the team in 2025 as a reliever if right now they don't have the utmost trust in King or Jojo Romero. Like, Matz was the guy that they went to, and Jojo didn't pitch on Monday. So that was notable to me. I don't know that means that Matz has left him in the order by any means. I think it more meant Steven Matz probably needed to pitch here soon, and it was a really good spot for him to be able to do so. And Liberatore going 7 just makes it a little bit easier. Everybody's getting that rest because there's going to come times where the season flows a different way and nobody's getting rest out there in the bullpen. So Libby takes a lot of pride, and it was interesting to hear him say tonight, too, he's not a huge fan of it when they have to turn that Memphis shuttle because he was on the other side of that for a long, long time, having to be the guy that was jostled back and forth. And so when he can take advantage of these opportunities and get him 7 innings and know that might make it less of an impetus for the Cardinals to have to turn to the Memphis shuttle and maybe some of those guys who have, earned their spot in the big leagues, but maybe only temporarily, If Libby can go 7 and keep one of his teammates there a little bit longer, obviously they'll be shuffled with a different teammate. But it's just this notion of like he's been in those shoes before and, wants to do his part to make sure that bullpen is not overly taxed to where sometimes decisions get made that aren't based on merit so much as who's available out of the bullpen. And that's part of the game. That's the business. That's the roster minutia that you have to do it that way. But I thought that was interesting that like he was asked about it in a roundabout way, but didn't. He kind of came out with that on his own about he's not a big fan of the shuffling that happens and wanting to do his part and I guess in some small way being able to limit that. So a lot of interesting stuff there from the Cardinals clubhouse, and a little bit of it you can read about at sportshubstl.com. My article post game of the Cardinals taking down Paul Skenes once again, 2-1 behind Matthew Liberatore, Gordon Graceffo, and Alec Burleson. You can read from all of those guys in that story. I would normally probably spend some more time cutting up some audio and playing for you on this podcast. I don't think I'm going to be doing it tonight. If I were deeper along in my career and I had a little bit more of a head on my shoulders and a little bit more time as it approaches the 1 a.m. hour here on Tuesday morning, I would cut all that raw audio up and I would post it to YouTube for the members only, and then that would be like a little perk you would get for joining the YouTube membership. Maybe I get to that point later in the summer if I'm really an efficiency machine with all my Cardinals coverage. If that's something you'd be interested in, let me know in the comments below and say, hey, I'd sign up for the membership if you were doing more of that kind of stuff with frequency. I try to include it in the podcast when I can, when I'm covering games and when it's relevant, like I was tonight. But it's almost 1, and it's a 12-15 game tomorrow. So I have to also think about shelf life sometimes of a podcast, and already going over 30 minutes here. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take a moment and say we got to go down on the farm, because if we don't, I don't know if I'm going to have time to get there. So we'll cut it there. What a win for the Cardinals on Tuesday. 2-1 over Paul Skenes and the Pirates. Let's talk a little bit about what happened down on the farm as well as we go. I just said it, down on the farm. It's time to go down on the farm. Brought to you by Hastings Layers Premium Eggs.
You'll be happier than a jackass eating thistle.
Huh? We mentioned it with Ivan Herrera. That's probably the biggest name we want to be talking about, making sure everybody's up to date on what he's been up to. 1 for 3 with an RBI. Did strike out a couple of times, did Herrera, but got an RBI hit in the Memphis Redbirds' loss, actually, to the Charlotte Knights. 5-3 in 11 innings. Game went extras out in Charlotte, where you got a home run as well from Thomas Saggese, who also reached base a couple of times via walk. His numbers are coming up in Memphis, and for those who would say, oh, why isn't he in St. Louis? Like, I get it. His time will come. But his numbers in Memphis, by the way, even after a really big game tonight with a homer and 2 walks, 231 average, 718 OPS this year in Memphis. So still a ways to go for him in terms of just maintaining that same consistency that we saw from Saggese in his small cup of coffee in the big leagues. I think he's going to be a real player for the Cardinals down the line, but it's okay that he's getting everyday at-bats right now to continue to fine-tune things. And again, he looked really good today, so you do like to see that. But the main thing for Herrera, he's hitting .412 with an OPS over 1,000, and the main thing right now is just getting more reps behind the plate. I believe he caught 7 innings, which was what was planned, and that matches around what it looks like for him taking 3 at-bats before exiting the game. Ian Bedell was pretty good. And when I say pretty good, he was very good for the Cardinals. I always love to highlight the Mizzou Made kid, who was part of that 2020 draft class. 4 2/3 innings, 1 run, a couple of walks, 3 hits allowed, 8 strikeouts for Bedell. His ERA is 7.4 on the season in Memphis. That's not great, but if he can string a couple more starts like that, I'm not even going to count him out from being a guy the Cardinals could turn to if their run of really good luck so far with starting pitching health should end up going the other direction. There's a guy that's been in the organization a handful of years. I don't know that he's a threat to be picked up in the Rule 5 at this point with a 7.43 ERA, but, I mean, if he starts to have more outings like this one, he may be somebody you want to get a look at before you potentially cast him aside as a casualty of just the numbers game. So we'll see on that, but I loved seeing that from Bedell tonight, 8 strikeouts, matching Liberatore and doing it in several fewer innings, 2 1/3 fewer, as he goes 4 2/3. Granillo gave up a run on a couple of hits, but has still got that 1.84 ERA in Memphis. I'm talking about Andre Granillo. He had a couple of strikeouts tonight. Riley O'Brien blows a save. He had 3 strikeouts, but gave up a couple of hits and a walk along with an earned run. Ryan Fernandez, kind of a mixed bag. He didn't give up any runs in an inning of work, but he walked 3 while striking out 2. The command has still got to improve, I would think, for him, but he's going to have time to do that right now while he's down there at AAA Memphis. So that's the word from Memphis. It has been, to me, a little bit of a longer rehab than I expected for Herrera, but evidently they wanted to get him more work behind the plate, which we noted could have been a possibility. So that is what we're seeing. Certainly probably won't be up for Wednesday, but he should be joining the Cardinals on the road trip, I would think, in short order, as he'll add a pretty significant bat to that lineup when he does. And hopefully he picks up right where he left off, because his hitting over the first couple of weeks of the season was a big calling card of this Cardinals team. Nothing to report from Springfield, as the Cardinals of AA were rained out against Arkansas, the Travelers. So we'll probably have a doubleheader coming up later on this week as they continue their series with Arkansas. The rain, it's gotta be done. Too much rain, tired of it. But that's what we got for tonight on B-Schaeff Daily. Cardinals have a chance. I mean, they win on Wednesday afternoon with Sonny on the bump, facing Mitch Keller. Cardinals will be 500, and they get that off day Thursday, and suddenly things are starting to come together a little bit. So is your optimism a little bit heightened for the Cardinals right now with what you're seeing from this club? They're playing a really good brand of baseball. I know it's happening all at home right now, and that's typically what has been the case all season long. Their home record is splendid, and we'll see coming up soon. They'll have a chance. I believe it's a 9-game road trip, 3-city road trip. I know that they'll go on the road and try to get that record up. But one more chance at home Wednesday. If they're 19-19 going out on the road, I think if you had told people that was going to be the case after Friday's loss to the Mets, they would have said you're crazy. But it's a legit possibility with the Cardinals just one win away from making that happen. So let me know your thoughts right now on everything going on, and I'll continue to stay glued to the comments and glued to everything going on with the Cardinals. But for now, we will talk to you next time on B-Schaeff Daily. Peace.